Welcome into A to Z Sports Prime Time on a Monday night. Hope everybody got off to a fantastic start this week. Happy to have you guys in for another edition of the Primetime Show. So, roster cuts are tomorrow at 3 p.m. Titans have already started with a handful of players who they've moved on from. And in fact, right before we started the show, there was a trade announced between the Tennessee Titans and the Carolina Panthers. So, we'll talk about that a little later on. But obviously, the biggest news of the day is the end of an era here in Tennessee. Bret Kern, the veteran punter, 13 years playing for the Titans, in his 15th year as an NFL player, being released earlier this morning. So we'll talk about Bret. We'll get into this trade for the new offensive lineman, the details that you guys need to know on the acquisition made from the Carolina Panthers, and a funny Bill Belichick video to wrap things up with a nice, neat bow. Before we get rolling, we get into this conversation. It's going to be emotional for some of you guys. I would like you to share this show on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and on Twitch. If you are hanging out on Twitter, retweet the show in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. If you are on Facebook Live like John Spainhoward or Raymond Rodriguez, you can share not a public, that's in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. If you are on YouTube, like Messiah A. King or Stephen King, a couple of Kings in the comment section on YouTube, and so many others, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done it already, and like the video if you would be good enough to do so. We would greatly appreciate it, as we do each and every night. As you share the show, more of you guys are going to show up, and we'll continue to welcome people in as we get going. So let's go ahead and get going. Welcome into A to Z Sports Prime Time on a Monday from the Superbook Sports Studio. I'm your host, Buck Rising, and I'm glad, as always, to be presented to you by our friends at the Ashton Real Estate Group of RE/MAX Advantage. GaryAshton.com, your dream address without the stress. That's what the Ashton team can provide to you. Trust the best in the business with the Intel Edge at GaryAshton.com. Two Rivers Ford, where you go for incredible customer service, a non-commissioned sales staff, and quality American-made Ford vehicles. Two Rivers Ford in Mount Juliet or online at tworiversford.com. Superbook Sports, where you can wager on football and every other major sport in their clean and easy-to-use app. Match your first bet up to $1,000, whether it wins or loses, in the Superbook Sports app today. So, I had known that Bret Kern was going to get cut for a little while. It was just a question of timing when that came down. And, right up until the radio show, I was trying to figure out what his situation was and when he was actually going to be released, because I know that Vrabel said they were going to cut players today, which they did. He wasn't the only one. Kern wasn't the only one that was cut. And they would cut players tomorrow, but they're still going to practice tomorrow, which is curious. I would be interested to know whether they cut the players that they're going to cut before practice, given that the roster deadline will come down at 3 p.m. Central Time on Tuesday. But Kern is the first to go. So for Bret, there's a lot of different things that you associate with Bret Kern. Kern is or was the longest tenured Titan. This would have been year 14 for him, 13 total seasons with the franchise since they picked him up off of waivers from the Denver Broncos in 2009. He has been here ever since. Now, if you are a longtime Titans fan, you know that was an era of particularly terrible football for this franchise. And it basically lasted until like 2015. Bret Kern played for Jeff Fisher. That's how far back that he goes. And you look at a situation for this guy in as many different places as they were a bad football team, Bret was always something that you could rely on. You could rely on Bret Kern, Jurrell Casey, and Delanie Walker. Really, those were the only three consistently competent players that the Titans could boast for the longest. Now Taylor Lewan is the longest tenured Titan on the roster. I believe this is year 8 for Taylor. And with Kern comes the end of an era. So I think it would be cool to remember some of the best memories of Bret Kern, because I have a few that I've had the opportunity to cover working with Bret for the last 6 years. And it's been a great pleasure for me. In fact, I'm sure I've told you guys this story before, but maybe there's some of you who may not have heard it or are new to the show or whatever the case may be. But I'll tell you more about how Bret Kern basically helped me start my career. We'll get to that later on. I'd like to pay tribute to him as we go through this. But certainly we're going to talk about the rest of the roster turnover too, and a new addition via trade that was announced about not even an hour ago, about 45 minutes ago, it would seem. So we'll go through that, and I'll ask you your Two Rivers Ford take on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, and on Twitch, if you would be so kind. Let me know in the comment section what your favorite memory of Bret Kern has been. Let me know in the comments, what is your favorite Bret Kern memory? Across 14 years, there have been some good ones. You guys can probably name a couple of games or a couple of specific punts in situations that this guy helped put over the top. Let me know what your favorite memory is, and we'll talk about it together right after I tell you about the people who make your Two Rivers Ford take possible. That is, of course, Two Rivers Ford. Two Rivers Ford is the place that you go for the new 2022 Ford Bronco, for the new F-150 Lightning, all-electric Mustang Mach-E. So many great new vehicles and certified pre-owned vehicles. One of the state's largest selections on their lot in Mount Juliet. Two Rivers Ford has been doing business in Middle Tennessee for nearly 40 years and operating with honesty and integrity. I can guarantee you that you will not have a more pleasant car shopping experience than at Two Rivers Ford. Two Rivers Ford in Mount Juliet, or online at tworiversford.com. So, what is your favorite Bret Kern memory? I'm sure some of you guys have a few. His son being the announcer at the Pro Bowl. So yes, that's from Karen. Bryce Kern. So there's 3 Colonels in total, 3 Kern children at this point. Bryce being the oldest, and Bryce is the person who's probably going to take my job. Now, I have a special place in my heart for Bryce Kern, even though he's clearly going to unseat me in the future and take all of the broadcasting jobs that I currently hold, because he's going to be a stud if he decides not to be a professional athlete like his pops. But for Bret, yes, Bryce working the Pro Bowl as a reporter, interviewing Lamar Jackson, interviewing Taylor Lewan, a lot of different players at the Pro Bowl was pretty funny to watch. Matt Stanley says his goofy Pro Bowl pictures from 2019. Yes, those are, I think they are going to be forever commemorated in GIF form if you're somebody who uses Twitter. Richard Dukes says his entire career with the Titans has been nothing less than great. Yeah, I'm going to read you some Bret Kern stats, okay? Because listen, Ryan Stonehouse is the better option for this team. I think everybody understands that at this point. I think Bret understands it at this point. But this is the summary of what Bret Kern has been for the Titans. He is the most accomplished punter in the history of the franchise. He's one of the franchise's longest tenured players. He earned 3 consecutive Pro Bowl selections from 17 to 19, first team All-Pro in 2019, and made second team All-Pro in 2017. He has his run of 177 consecutive games played with the club from 2009 to 2020 was the second longest streak in the history of the Tennessee Titans / Houston Oilers history, behind Bruce Matthews, who started 232 consecutive games, which is, of course, crazy. 13 seasons played in a Titans uniform. He tied Brad Hopkins for the third most in team history, trailing only Matthews and Elvin Bethea, who has played with 19 and 16 seasons with the franchise. Kern is one of 2 players who has played for every head coach the Tennessee Titans have had since the move to Tennessee. Him and Derek Morgan. That's the list. That's crazy to think about. So Bret has been around for a long, long time. He's been a legitimate weapon. They think Stonehouse is going to have the same kind of promise. And so now he's at this point where he's ready to move on. Now, where he lands, I think, is going to be interesting. But that will be a discussion for another day. If you're asking me what my favorite moment from Bret Kern was, well, that would happen to be in 2019, the year that he was an All-Pro. in their first playoff game en route to the AFC Championship game. They, if you'll remember, went to New England. They faced Tom Brady in his last career game with the New England Patriots. People think that Logan Ryan ended the dynasty of Tom Brady, and maybe that's so because Logan Ryan did make an interception after this play. But I think truly that it was Bret Kern and his punt with 25 seconds left that ended the evil empire.
Most in the league, and Kern gets a line drive punt away that's bounding to a halt at the 1. Perfection.
And sitting in the press box that day or that night, we knew it was done. We knew that they had won the game, and then came the interception by Logan Ryan to actually seal the victory. But there's so much about Bret that you can recall. There's so many different moments like that. Now, that was one of particular significance because that's the most playoff success that they had. I mean, at any point in the last decade, certainly. And I was asked today, I did an interview with my colleagues on 3HL on 104.5 The Zone, as I do every Monday. And I think it was Dawn that asked me, am I worried about the decision that they've just made to cut Bret Kern in favor of Ryan Stonehouse? And, I mean, I'm sure at some point we'll see an undrafted rookie free agent have a bit of a bad outing. Like, I don't think that Ryan Stonehouse is going to be perfect game in and game out. I think he's got all the potential in the world, and I thought he looked absolutely great. I thought he looked stellar on Saturday night in the final preseason game against the Cardinals. But I think with all that being said, there's no reason to be bent out of shape about the punting situation right now. Now, if we get 6 weeks in and he's screwing up the holds for Randy Bullock and he's being super erratic with his accuracy, or weather starts to impact him in ways that Kern was perpetually prepared for. I remember walking in the locker room, basically, at any point in the last 4 or 5 years, and Bret Kern would always have his meteorology charts out because that's what Bret did that's his preparation. Like, Bret knows how to hit the ball with the kind of nuances and technique that it requires to have the kind of accuracy that Bret has had over the course of his career. But how much time he spent on weather forecasting as a punter, I mean, really, like, he would rival some meteorologists in town. So we'll see what happens with Ryan Stonehouse. It's not a problem until it becomes a problem. So if you're a Titans fan, you hope that the punting situation does not bring about issues that you never had to worry about with Bret Kern. But certainly, the only player since Derek Morgan to play for every coach in the Titans era. You don't see that kind of longevity with one franchise, no matter what the position is. Hardly ever. In fact, I don't think Peyton Manning lasted as long with the Indianapolis Colts as Bret Kern did with the Titans. I don't think that, Tom Brady obviously did last that long with the New England Patriots, but that's one of the names that comes to mind. I was reminded of this because I was watching Andy Lee, the punter for the Cardinals, out there on Saturday night. Andy Lee is 40 years old, and he's still out here doing it, to his credit, but he's been with a bunch of different teams. You can play a long time in the league, but it's so hard to be an asset long enough to one franchise to where you stay with that franchise throughout, it would seem, the entirety of his career. Now, where he ends up, I have no idea. Because Buffalo's cap situation is kind of sneaky bad. Bret Kern is not going to be inexpensive as far as punters go. Now, they'll get him cheaper than he was currently on the Titans roster for, and they ate about a $550,000 dead cap hit. They cleared up about $2.2 million in trading, or rather in releasing Bret Kern. But I don't know where he's going to land, because I don't think the Bills right now, we'll see what they do with their roster cuts as well. I don't think the Bills have the money for Bret Kern. So we'll see what happens. I think a lot of people just took that as a given, and it makes all the sense in the world because that's where he's from, and they're a Super Bowl contender, and let's go out there and get a ring. But for Bret, I don't know that it's as cut and dry as that. So we'll see where he ends up. Adam Weber says, why did the Titans release him instead of trading him? Who's going to trade for a 36-year-old punter making $2.75 million when every other franchise knows that the Titans are going to release one of them? That's not like, where's the leverage there? There is no leverage there as far as a trade is concerned. You can't shop, and it's not, he's a valuable player, but like, people aren't going to trade for that contract at that age when he's just lost his job. Like, that's not, no NFL general manager is going to take that call seriously. So we will leave it at that. Daniel Ferris says, I believe Bret Kern is the last Titans player to have ever played for Jeff Fisher. That's correct. It was he and Derek Morgan. Like that was the list. And now Derek Morgan has been gone for several years, and Bret Kern, of course, will not be a Titan in the future. Now, here's what I'll say. And then we'll move on to talk about this new offensive lineman, because I know a lot of you guys saw this trade, and we'll talk through it for those of you who haven't. But I'll say this about Bret, and you try to be objective when you do the job that people like me are lucky enough to get to do, because you're, first and foremost, like, I'm a talk show host now, but I started out as a reporter. And so you're not there to be friends with the professional athletes or the coaches. You're not there to, you're not there to glad hand and, to just hang out with professional athletes. You're there to do a job. And sometimes that can be uncomfortable depending on what kind of information you get on a certain player and how you handle that player in a certain instance. Bret Kern, when I was 22 years old, fresh out of college, working overnights for $10 an hour and trying to cover Titans practice during the day for an outlet at that I started at out of college, 102.5 here locally, a radio station. I wasn't making any money. They didn't have to pay me any money because who the hell was I at the time? But they didn't have anybody going. They didn't have anybody going to Titans practice at the time. Tehran wasn't here yet. Cam Wolf, I think, wasn't here yet, and Koharski was still working at the Zone. So like ESPN 102.5 did not have access to the ESPN Titans reporter at the time because it was PK. And so I asked one of my bosses, I was like, hey, can I start going to Titans practice to get audio and video? Like, that would seem to be important. I understand, like, at the time, like they were very, very Predators heavy because the Preds pay them to carry their games. And so, obviously you want to get what you're paying for. But, to neglect the Titans at the time, I was like, well, this is stupid. Let me go cover an NFL team. Let me go do this and provide, a lane for myself. And so I got there for the first time. I remember I emailed there. I was still working overnights. I emailed one of their PR people at 2 a.m. and said, hey, I would like to be credentialed to come to practice. And they said, sure, we'll try it out and we'll see how it goes. I had zero experience. Never been in an NFL locker room before. Never covered a professional sports team before. I was just some slap overnight producer that started showing up to their practices, and way too young and way underqualified to be there. And I was in that locker room for like the first 3 days of it would have been the 2017 season, because they drafted Corey Davis and Adoree Jackson in the first round. I remember being in there, being terrified of all of the players, because I'd never talked to a professional athlete in my life, much less to like go up to their locker room or go up to their individual lockers and grill them about how good or how bad they did in practice or in a game at a certain time. And I remember that there was I didn't know a lot of the players. I didn't know much about this franchise. I just moved to Nashville, and I really, I didn't pay attention to the NFL when I was in college. I didn't have an NFL team. I didn't care. So I had to learn everything about the Titans franchise that I know now via YouTube, late night YouTube sessions while I was working overnights to learn about the franchise. That, and I got to work with Floyd Reese, of course, the former general manager who was at the radio station at the time. And Floyd was so gracious with his time when he had questions. But I remember being in the locker room about 3 or 4 days, and I hadn't talked to a player. I scared shitless to talk to a player. I couldn't get myself to do it, even though I was there with an incredible opportunity that almost nobody my age gets, or my age at the time gets. And I just remember somebody coming up to me, tapping me on the shoulder and being like, "Hey man, do you need somebody to interview?" And it's Bret Kern. And I knew who Bret was at the time. I did not know like the history of Bret at the time, but I was so grateful for him recognizing that I was clearly out of place, that I was a new face in his locker room, that I was still trying to figure out what this whole situation was. And he was like, "Hey man, do you need to ask somebody some questions today? Because I noticed you haven't talked to anybody else and you've just been kind of wandering around here aimlessly." Bret was incredibly gracious. And I think that when you try and keep things objective, and you try and remember that there's a fine line between the job that you're there to do and the athletes that you get to cover, you create these relationships. And I'm always going to be grateful to Bret, always, because he has been nothing but incredible to me throughout the course of my career. And he really helped me get to a place where I was confident enough to talk to professional athletes the way that I do every day now. But it was not the time. It was not the case at the time. He really did me a solid, and it's just a small thing, a very, very small thing, and didn't take him but a second. But he was the only one to do it, and I'll forever be grateful to Bret Kern that way, and I will certainly miss him as a part of the locker room, because he made it enjoyable. He's one of many. There's a lot of great guys and coaches and players and scouts and all these different things that I've gotten the opportunity to get to know across the league, not just in the locker room with the Titans. But for me, I'm going to miss him. He's somebody who I hope we will continue to be friends, no matter where his next landing spot takes him, or if he decides to hang it up. He's had an incredible career. And I just wanted to share that with you guys, because I'm sure I've told that story at some point before, but you never know who's new in here. And like I said, I owe him a lot. I really do. So we'll see what happens with Bret Kern. I hope he ends up on the Bills, and I hope he gets a Super Bowl ring out of it. I truly do. Alex Blaine Mann says, "What year was that, Buck?" So that would have been my first full season. I covered a handful of games in 2016, but I started going to practice every day in 2017. So I'd count 2017 as my first full season covering the team. And yeah, that was, God, that doesn't seem, I guess it's not that long ago, but it's a hell of a lot longer than I realized it was, until you start to see guys like Bret getting cut. Anyway, that's how it goes. Okay, let's move on and let's talk about the new offensive lineman that they just traded for. Actually, there's a couple of questions that I have here, and I'll answer those, and then I'll move on. Let's see. I'm sorry, I'm the scroll. Okay, Buck, did you start covering the Titans before Zach and Austin? No, Zach and Austin have been here a lot longer than me. Zach and Austin are both from here. So it's not like they were at 102.5. They were at 102.5 when I first got there out of college as an unpaid intern. Then they had their morning show with 102.5, and then the radio station let them go, which was a terrible mistake, because now the A to Z Sports empire is strong, and I think that was not. I think that was quite short-sighted at the time from our previous employer. But I worked with them for a very, very small time at 102.5, and that's how they knew me when they offered me a job in 2019, because I was still there and there was not opportunity for advancement, and they were still paying me worse than somebody that works at Walmart or McDonald's or something like that to cover an NFL team. And Austin and Zach said, "Okay, we'll give you a bigger shot at this thing if you want to kind of go in on this project." Or it wasn't really a project at the time, on this business model that they had started. And to their credit, it has been hugely, hugely successful. So that's that. Yeah, Austin and Zach have been at it for a while. Must have really sucked, says Cat Van Diver. Where we were originally. Yeah, listen, I'm grateful for the time that I think they probably would say this too in an honest moment. Although I'm sure Zach has stronger sentiments than all of us, because Zach has stronger sentiments about just about everything than all of us, which is why we love him. But I think, I think it gave all of us a good opportunity to kind of cut our teeth at a place that, has to survive on younger, cheaper people that way, because everybody wants to work in sports. And I understand that, like, not every radio station has a big time budget, the way that like 104.5 does, the way the place that I work at now and do my radio show for them. But yeah, I think there was a lot of good opportunities, and I not to toot my own horn, but I count Austin, Zach, and myself as a part of good opportunities that they did not see the value in at the time. And I think that it has been better for all three of us to go the way that we did. But again, I'm like, listen, they didn't have to let me cover an NFL team at 22, to their credit. So while I did not like the situation that I was in with them, I am grateful for the opportunities and the very, very, very early experience that I got, because I've been covering an NFL team now this is coming up on my 6th season, and I'm not even 30 yet. So I think that has been beneficial. Anyway, this has been hugely self-involved. I'm sorry. Let's move on and let's talk about this offensive lineman, because I know a lot of you guys are just shut up with these stories already. I'm sure a lot of you are saying, talk about the offensive lineman, damn it. Okay, let's do that. I'll do that right after I tell you about our friends at Superbook Sports. We, of course, are broadcasting live from the Superbook Sports studio. That's where you go to wager on all the action, whether it's football, basketball, baseball, every major sport. You can wager on it in the Superbook Sports app. That is the place that you can get incredible odds boosts. You can get the Titans plus 250 to win the AFC South. Crazy odds boost in the Superbook Sports app. You can get the Vols to win 8+ games plus 100. Very, very beneficial and better friendly stuff. Superbook Sports is where you go. If you want terms and conditions, go to superbook.com. Download the Superbook Sports app. And if you have a gambling problem, call the Tennessee Red Line, 1-800-889-9789. So the new offensive lineman that the Titans acquired, because the question that we had initially planned to ask you guys is this on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch, as we talk about the Titans roster construction tonight. What position do you think the Titans have their eyes on as they watch other teams make roster cuts? So what position do you think the team is still going to keep an eye on? Now, they made a move for an offensive lineman today, but when we talked to Mike Vrabel about it, I guess this would have been yesterday after the final preseason game, we asked Mike about claiming players just in general, and this is what the head coach had to say.
In claiming guys, is it you have a list of guys, positions that you look for depth and do it, or is it more as guys are coming on the wire, doing it on the fly, having to be ready to pick up guys as you see them?
I would say that we probably identify guys after watching, some of the preseason games, saying, hey, potentially this would be somebody that we would, may have interest in if they were available. John and his staff go through all that. We meet about it, we talk about it, and then, if they do, then there's a long, claiming order. Chances are if we are interested in them, maybe somebody else is, but, go through that claiming process and see where it all shakes out.
So that was Mike Vrabel talking yesterday about the waiver claims process. And then today at about 7:30, a little over an hour ago, the Titans made a trade. So they acquired from the Carolina Panthers offensive lineman Dennis Daly. I think that's how his last name is pronounced, Daley. And they also acquired a 7th-round selection in the 2024 draft. They traded away a 5th-round pick in 2024 as well. So Daly has played a lot of different positions on the offensive line. He has been in the NFL as a 6th-round pick since 2019. He is 6'6", 325, so it's a lot of human that they've just acquired. And he's played in 34 total games in the NFL since he joined the Panthers. He's had 21 starts. Now, remember, the Panthers haven't had a good offensive line, so this is a depth piece that you're hoping can just kind of give you, that comes in with experience should you have a situation where one of your top line players go down, as will inevitably and unfortunately be the case. So he's got 21 total starts since 2019, 13 at left tackle, 7 at left guard, 1 at right guard in his career. Last season, he played in 15 games for Carolina. He started 4 games at left guard, 4 starts at left tackle, and 1 start at right guard. So he's played a lot of football in a lot of different spots since he came in as a 6th-round draft pick out of South Carolina. Now, what do I think of the move? I think of the move that this is something that was essential for them to do. I don't know what the cost associated. In fact, I can look up his contract right now. He's a 6th-round pick, so he's not making a ton of money. But for a team that's as cash strapped as the Titans are at this point, because remember, they still have to pay their things like the practice squad still count against their salary cap. So to look at the contract for Dennis Daly, he is making a salary this year of $661,000. Now, remember, you cleared up about $2.2 million in the release of Bret Kern with a dead cap hit of about $550,000. I think the situation for the Titans is that they didn't like their offensive line depth any more than you or I did, and they acquired a player who is going to who has played some football and is going to be able to give them a couple of things at a lot of different positions. Because I think he immediately becomes the 3rd best tackle on this roster. Beyond Lawan and Nick Petit-Frere, they didn't have anybody. Dylan Radins isn't a tackle right now, and apparently he's not a good enough guard for them to just kind of ride with it at this point. Just give up a second for a big-name lineman to start, says Kedrick KB Bell. Yeah, but you also have to find a team who's willing to give that lineman up. Like, I'm sure you could find some deal, but teams don't just give away good offensive linemen. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's not, it's almost, a quarterback is a little different because there's far fewer quarterbacks than there are offensive linemen. But teams, there's not a lot of great offensive linemen in football. There's not a lot of good offensive linemen in football. There's dudes, and they some fit in schemes where they can mask some of their deficiencies, but like offensive line is not a position that's like easily found, even with draft picks and things like that. So, it sounds as easy as give up a second for a big name lineman to start, but think about this. You already kind of gave up a 2nd-round pick on an offensive lineman. You already gave up a 1st-round pick and a 2nd-round pick on 2 offensive linemen who aren't starting players for you right now. One being Isaiah Wilson and one being Dylan Radins. Now, theoretically, you could trade for a proven commodity and not risk it to the draft the way that you have tried and failed in 2 previous drafts, but seem to have gotten it right with Nick Petit-Frere. So, again, I say to you, I understand why it would seem as easy as that, but it's not that easy to just say, all right, who's your best offensive lineman? I'll give you a 2 for him, and we'll roll the dice, because they're going to look around at you and be like, yeah, but then what do I do for my quarterback? Because there's not an offensive lineman for me to go out there and replace X, Y, and Z with. So something to keep in mind, and something for everybody to remember, that almost every team needs offensive line help. Like, I understand you run it through the prism of your team, but a lot of teams have bad offensive line situations. So what I would expect to see, and we'll see who else they cut tomorrow morning. What I would expect to see is the Titans cut below 53. Like if they went to 50 or 51 and gave themselves a little wiggle room to pick up other players once teams make their cuts as well, I would expect the Titans to go below 53 in their initial cut and then fill out the roster, or try to fill out the roster with a couple of different players who they may favor over guys that they just released or who they think can make their depth better. So I would expect additional movement to come at some point tomorrow, probably after the 3 p.m. deadline. Chill Mode says, Do I think Dez is gone? I honestly don't know the answer to that question, because here's the thing about Dez. All right. Nothing on the football field or the practice field has shown me that Dez Fitzpatrick has gotten substantially better. I think Dez has worked really hard. He is, to his credit, I think he has done the things that they have asked him to try and improve. It's just that the improvement hasn't been there in tangible ways. I would tell you that I wouldn't keep him. If he makes it on the practice squad again, fine. But like, the value for Dez Fitzpatrick. So say you asked me, for example, would you rather keep Logan Woodside or Dez Fitzpatrick? I would tell you that I would rather keep Logan Woodside, because I know that Logan Woodside is going to be an asset in some form or fashion, and I haven't seen where Dez can be that to this point. Even if Woodside isn't going to help you win football games outright, like, he provides a service that is still in question for the football team. While Malik Willis is going to be quarterback number 2 and is going to continue to grow and develop, and did make great strides, I thought, during the preseason and during training camp. I think there would still be some value in keeping Woodside behind him, even if it's on the practice squad. But if you ask me if I was to pick between those two particular players, I would say, yeah, I would rather have Woodside, because at least I know that he can continue to provide value in some form or fashion. Christian DeVoe says, is Racy a lock at this point? Racy had a really, really strong start to camp, but he has not been very impressive in the last couple of weeks. Really since that big catch in Baltimore for, 48 yards from Malik. Like, there hasn't been anything from Racy that's really popped in the way that he did the first couple of weeks at camp. Now, I think that that's still in progress, and I think, if Racy ends up being a more athletic version of NWI, and it's just kind of a slow burn, I think Racy was a 6th-round pick, and NWI, an undrafted rookie free agent. So if you can find a similar developmental process there for a player like that, he's got a lot more upside. But right now, I think he's certainly more of a roster lock. I don't know that he's a lock, but he certainly has a much better chance to make the roster than I would think Dez does. Now, Dez may end up, they may end up both on the 53-man roster. It depends on what they do with the quarterback math, and 3 quarterbacks can change a lot of things, or 2 quarterbacks can allow you to keep some more bodies in a particular area of need. But we don't know. We don't know what will happen until we get to 3 p.m. tomorrow. We don't concretely know until we get to 3 p.m. tomorrow. All right. There was a funny video that came out from Bill Belichick, or from a New England press conference today, that made me laugh. I want to play this for you, and I want to ask you the question: who is the one person that can make Bill Belichick smile? Let me know in the comments on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, and on Twitch. We will talk about this together right after I tell you about the fine folks at the Ashton Real Estate Group of RE/MAX Advantage. Don't sell without the intel. That's the line that you see on all of Gary's billboards when you're driving around Middle Tennessee. It's the line that I tell you about all the time, because the intel matters when you are operating in this Nashville real estate market. That intel helps you sell your home without any showings or staging, helps you find your next home while the market is still red hot as you sell your current one, and helps you win the buyer battle and cash in on your home equity right now. GaryAshton.com can get you that intel edge to succeed, while everybody else, screws around with the same properties, the same listings, with half the information that Gary and the Ashton Group can provide to you. So trust the team that your favorite teams trust. The Ashton Real Estate Group of RE/MAX Advantage at GaryAshton.com. So, who can make Bill Belichick smile? Mark Jones says Lucifer. Zarice on YouTube says Scrooge McDuck. Billy Mann says Robert Kraft. I don't know. It sounds like it's been kind of tense. Ryan Powell says Vrabel or Gronk. It sounds like Gronk wasn't all that big a fan. Every time Gronk talks about the Patriots now, it's kind of like, yeah, I'm glad we got out of there. And then he does that ridiculous giggle that he does, like a giant, almost 300-pound puppy dog. Vrabel and Bill have had good moments, certainly, but I think Mike still remembers the fact that he got schlepped off or cut in the middle of a contract negotiation to go to the Kansas City, or traded rather, to go to the Kansas City Chiefs. I don't think he's quite forgotten about that. But one person walked into a Bill Belichick press conference today and received not just a smile, but applause from Bill Belichick. who I don't think I've ever seen clap for anybody at any point in my entire life.
Boomer.
Haven't been to one of these in a couple of years.
You're graced. You're graced. You're looking good.
Goal is to move forward, right?
Boomer.
Haven't been to one of these in a couple of years.
You're graced. You're graced. You're looking good.
Goal is to move forward, right?
Boomer, Chris Berman in the house, I guess, for just a random Patriots press conference. Now, I assume because ESPN is based in Bristol, Connecticut, and of course everything's located geographically easy to get around. I don't know how close Chris Berman lives to Foxborough. I don't know why he'd just be showing up at a random Bill Belichick press conference unless he's doing some kind of special ESPN assignment. But yeah, Boomer shows up at a press conference, he gets a clap. How about that? That's where it goes. I will say to you that that's probably about the only person that can make Bill Belichick smile, much less clap at this point. MB says it's Lawrence Taylor. Bill thinks he's the best player ever. That's probably a good one too. Bill Belichick has a lot of respect for people that matter in football history. Lawrence Taylor and Chris Berman do have their place in football history. Okay. It's going to do it for us tonight. Roster cuts. We'll recap everything that the Titans do once they cut down their final 53. Tomorrow on the radio show, we're talking Tennessee. It's game week for the Vols. They'll play a game on Thursday against Ball State. We will have the voice of the Vols, Bob Kessling of the Vol Network, on the radio show tomorrow. And we basically are going to put together our on-air 53-man roster. So we'll do that from 10 to 1. On 104.5 The Zone. We hope you'll come hang out with us. And then if I don't see you on radio, or if I don't talk to you on radio, I will see you tomorrow night on A to Z Sports Prime Time. Have a great rest of your evening.